Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this roundtable, which is entitled Pioneering Visions, the Curators Who Brought Aboriginal Art to Europe. So today we have our pioneers. It's a very impressive panel under a very impressive image. Probably most of you know what is on the screen. The panel will be moderated by Georges Petitjean, our curator at Fondation Opale. It's going to last about an hour, if I understand well. And I'm just going to say a very short words about the biographies of our panelists. Starting, of course, with Bernhard Lüthi. Well, Bernhard's CV is in the exhibition right next to this room, so I think all of you know Bernhard. As you told us yesterday, you are self-taught, but even though you're a self-taught artist and art historian, you lectured at the Düsseldorf Academy of Fine Arts. You have been working as curator for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Arts Board and was responsible for the participation of the Aboriginal artists in Magiciens de la Terre, which we see here. You co-curated Aradara in 93-94, and you organized RARC John Maroon Jules solo exhibition at the Tangley Museum and further venues in 2005 and 2006. I'll stick to that. I think there will be extensive discussion about these exhibitions later. If I take next to Bernhard, Mr. Ulrich Krempel. Ulrich, so in your own words, your connection to Aboriginal art started with Magiciens de la Terre, that was a moment, and then it was pretty much about talking with Bernhard on different projects and experiences in the realm of Aboriginal art. You have studied history of art, Germanistic and philosophy in Bochum and Rome, was teaching in Duisburg, Essen, Kassel and Marburg. You then curated the Städtlichen Kunsthalle in Düsseldorf before becoming the head curator of the Museum Volkwang in Essen, the head curator then of the Kunstsammlung Nordrhein-Westfalen in Düsseldorf, and in 1993 until 2014 you were the director of the Sprengel Museum in Hanover. Sorry for the extremely brief summary of your long careers, gentlemen, but it's for the sake of speaking more at the round table. So, Jean-Hubert's CV is even longer. So Jean-Hubert studied art history at La Sorbonne before joining the career of curating the French National Museum system. You worked at the Louvre to start with, before joining the Musée National d'Art Moderne, back then located at the Palais de Tokyo. You played a key role in Francis Picabier's groundbreaking exhibition in '76 at the Grand Palais. You were then named curator of the Contemporary Arts Department at the Centre Pompidou. I'm jumping from one to the other very quickly. You were the curator of the French Pavilion at the Sydney Biennale in 1982, and the same year you became director of the Kunsthalle in Bern. You were the director of the National Museum of Modern Art in Paris from 1987 to 90, of Château de Doiron from 91 to 94, the National Museum of African and Oceanic Art from 94 to 99, Kunstpalast Düsseldorf, 99-2006, and artistic director of the Padiglione d'Arte Contemporanea in Milan, just after that. Obviously, Magiciens de la Terre is the most, the biggest accomplishment, I would say, we will discuss of. Yeah, I think I'll stop here if it's okay for you. And you, Lindsay. Lindsay was born in Australia, but lived more than half his life in Germany. He has a PhD in experimental physics then was conducting research at the German and Italian universities from 95 to 90, from 85 to 95. Lindsay worked with visually handicapped people, so in different projects, and then had a dual life, a career in international telecommunications, together with working or side by side with work at the Aboriginal Art Gallery Bear with his wife Elizabeth Bear, who is here with us. Yes. In 1997 until 2007, Lindsay's life was filled with annual road trips to the art centres in Central and North Australia. In 2022, he co-authored with his wife Elizabeth a 500 pages book on Indigenous art. And since retiring last year, Lindsay has been concentrating on the sociology of fine arts. Last but not least, George, our moderator for the morning. George is, as you know, our head curator at Fondation Opale. He's curating BERNHARD's collection since 2017. He has a doctorate on the art of the Western Desert from La Trobe University in Melbourne. His field of interest is the transition of Aboriginal Australian art from its original sites to the art world. I have spoken too much already. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Welcome to all. I'm very honored, I have to say, to be in such an important delegation, and people were very important to the recognition of Indigenous Australian art, of First Nations Australian art in Europe. So we have had all very long careers, and I'm sure that the public will want to know much more about how you brought Aboriginal art to Europe. So let me start with the first question, and perhaps I'll start with Bernhard. And it's a question that actually each of you could answer on your own terms. But could you tell us something about what you were up to when you wanted to introduce Aboriginal art to a European public in a contemporary art context? We are speaking now in the 1980s. What was it? Because it hadn't been shown before in Europe in a contemporary art context.
It was a question of anthropology and not of the visual arts. And in my opinion, this was not the right way to present Australian Aboriginal art by the world. So, as you possibly are aware, anthropology by many First Nation people all around the world were seen as an offspring of colonialism, and as we are aware in Australia and until today, in my opinion, it's a pity that the royal British family could not decide until today to say sorry to Australian Aboriginal people. And I think, in my opinion, it's about time. But I should not delegate this to the Governor General. They are still there, and they should speak for themselves and not delegate what happened to not only Australian Aboriginal people, also the people in Canada, the Maori people and so on. We know all the British colonialism, which was not a very nice thing. And in my opinion, so far there was no, and I have to speak out freely and open about this, there were other cases, we know too well here in Europe, of the bad Nazi times. All these people, or most of these people, were put on trial, but never anything like this happened to the British guys, means the British royal family. So it's time. Something, the least what could be done is get rid of the bloody Union Jack of the Australian flag and replace it with the Australian flag.
You make that very clear with the Australian flag or the Aboriginal flag, which is, for the people that don't know it, which is on Bernhard's shirt.
Yes.
But this brings us to, as you mentioned, it's not only about First Nations Australian people, but First Nations people everywhere in the world. And this brings us perhaps also chronologically to Magiciens de la Terre, the unavoidable exhibition, legendary exhibition, of which we see an iconic photograph. So Jean-Hubert, when you did Magiciens de la Terre in a contemporary art context, Centre Pompidou, my question is twofold. On one side, how were the reactions? What were you up against? And secondly, was art, just to continue with Bernhard's words, secondly, was art also a political statement? Was it also a manner to give the First Nations artists a voice about wider things than only art?
Yeah, maybe I could say also how I got in touch with Aboriginal art the first time, or what brought me, well, to make this exhibition Magiciens de la Terre, but there are lots of reasons, of course. I will not bother you with that. But one thing was very important for me. I was curator for the French participation of the '82 Sydney Biennale. I brought some French artists there, but what was absolutely striking is that for this Biennale, the curator invited a group of Aboriginals to make a painting on the floor. It was quite difficult because they had to do that in a completely closed room where nobody was allowed to see during the ceremonies, who took several days, and then it was opened. And among the artists who were there, the French one, but all over the world, where there were artists coming from many, many different countries, this started an enormous discussion among artists, and whether it was allowed to include these people in an art exhibition seen in the context of so-called international contemporary art at that time. And there were the pro and the contras, and the discussion went on every evening when we had dinner after that we were installing the exhibition. And then I thought, this is such an issue, I have to do something with that, you know, and this is where the idea started. Then, about the exhibition, the reaction were quite negative. It's very difficult to tell. Well, you know, I'm asked very, very often about my exhibitions in general. What are the reactions of the public? It's something you cannot tell, because there are people who like it, people who hate it, and then there are discussions sometimes. Sometimes the discussion come into the media, sometimes not, you know. So it's quite difficult. But, sorry, in general, let's say that the market, the gallerists, and the people linked to the market were absolutely against the exhibition. And I was really a little bit rejected from, you know, the little milieu that we had, the art scene on this level. I think that many people who were, I would say, who came especially to see the show, either from other countries or not from the Parisian art scene, found it very interesting. And I had even the feeling that some people coming from what we call the region, the province in France, you know, had the sort of saying, oh, well, finally they show us something which is not the same stuff we always get in the magazines and so on, you know. But these people had no, or this opinion had no access to the media. And most of the media were, let's say, half and half, you know, in the middle, because the critics were, of course, well, clever enough not to attack it directly, because they could understand they could be treated as racist doing that. So it was a little bit yes and no, why not, and something maybe interesting, but it was very in between.
Yeah.
That was what I can say, but it was very difficult, and it took about, I would say, 5 or 6 years. After half a dozen years, some artists came back to me and said, after all, you were right, you know. But it took a long time to be digested. I can tell you, even at the Centre Pompidou, the curators never really digested the exhibition. They're still having problems with that. It's still not in their frame, and they still have a problem with the exhibition. Only the new generation, really the generation after mine, they can cope with it.
All right. Well, this brings us to Ulrich, because Ulrich, you were curator at Museum Rheinland-Westfalen when Bernhard probably approached you for the Araja exhibition. Was it the same at your institution? You were one of there were a few curators probably. How was it received there? The idea of show.
I think the situation in a city like Düsseldorf, where I worked at that time, was quite interesting, but very different. Düsseldorf was one of the main cities, West German cities for the arts. Good connections to the United States, and everything worked well, and famous people came, and this and that, and so on. Everybody knew about the top scene or the top 10 and whatsoever. What I was interested in was quite different. We had good contacts with people like Edo Eloko, an African artist who had studied
work in
who has a work up there. Unfortunately, he can't be with us because he passed away already. But Edo was someone who studied with boys, for example, and there were Asian students studying with boys. So we had other voices, we had other people talking to us. We had even people from Switzerland helping us to discuss new aspects, like Bernhard, who was vivid and doing things, uproar things in the academy, and so that was one thing. On the other hand, for example, I had done an exhibition with Wilfredo Lam, the Cuban artist, someone who came from Asian, African, European background. The parents were of all these different things, and who had lived in Cuba, who had lived in Spain, who had then lived in France, emigrated under German occupation back to the US, and so, and that was talking to his widow, Swedish lady, Lou Laurin Lam, unforgettable, for example, told me a lot about the difficulties of racism, of putting out people of color and whatsoever. And then one day, in this vivid situation, also in Düsseldorf, came Bernhard, and we talked about many things, and he talked about this idea that he had together with you in Paris, because you wanted to do Aradara, the big show, and after you left in Paris, the museum was, it couldn't go on. And then we said, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
They just cancelled it, my successor cancelled it. Yeah.
Voila, this is what ordinated successors often do. You follow the rules and follow the wishes of the bosses or whatever, you know, the money givers and the politicians. So I thought picking that up was very interesting, because the first director of the Kunstsammlung Nordrhein-Westfalen was Werner Schmalenbach, who was a dedicated follower of African art, who was a collector of African art, who had already done in the Kunstsammlung Nordrhein-Westfalen art collection of North Rhine-Westphalia, a state collection, an exhibition about African art, sculpture, in a very, let's say, European way, but he also published about African art and everything. So it was a kind of neighborhood where things got open. Why? because, of course, we all knew that the sources for modernism in Europe, in Germany and everywhere, in France, was the kind of lending, stealing or whatever, borrowing ideas from Africa, from the South Sea and all these cultures that were kind of conquered and robbed in the connection with international extension of European powers and so on. And I thought it must be fantastic and interesting to join the ideas of Bernhard, who was someone who had already mostly given up his own artistic work and dedicated himself completely to the propagation of the idea of helping Aboriginal art. He was very convincing, even if he said yesterday we had fights and things, okay, but it was a long process to get the exhibition done. In the end, it took us 3 years, and his way of working was quite different from the usual way of museum people. We had to find money, we had to find support. Thanks also to my director, my then director, a younger one, Armin Zweite, great guy, who is now living retired in Munich, who helped us finding money from Lufthansa to do the transports for free, and who helped us to get tickets to go to Australia and to move around and to talk to everybody, even the old colonial officers with her socks up to the knees and shorts, and so who were sitting there and not supporting the idea of this exhibition. But fortunately enough, there were wonderful people in the Aboriginal departments who supported us. Sorry, so this long story. But it was in the mood of the time. We wanted to do things, and the old guys in the academies who said then afterwards, is this going to be a kind of exhibition of airport art or whatever? This is what you heard as well, but they have been punished by history, I would say.
Well, Bernhard is still on the barricades, so the battle is still being fought. And Lindsay, that brings us to you, Elisabeth, and started the gallery. Elisabeth Berg started the gallery in 1979 already.
97. Sorry, 1997.
97, yeah. So, from a commercial point of view, do you feel similarities in the perception of what you were doing, showing indigenous Australian art to a German public? You were based in Speyer, so it was not Paris, it was not France. It was, let's say, closer to Düsseldorf, or at least in Germany. Do you also feel that the German public was perhaps more open to indigenous Australian art than they?
Okay, let me say, I first came to Germany, to the middle of Europe, because at the time, in the 80s in Australia, it was very English-American culture. And I thought, let me see many more cultures, go to Europe. I went to Europe, I saw many, many art galleries, beautiful, I'm still here. But I discovered, together with Elizabeth, my wife, that other art forms outside of the European, let me say, de facto styles were not very well represented. And we found that indigenous Australian art had a new way, a different way, let me say, of looking at the world. And to understand it takes time. You can look at the first images, the first paintings, and enjoy from a superficial way, but to get a bit more background of what the artist was thinking, why the politics is put in that way, not another one, like the works in the exhibition from Vernon Archi, where he basically gives you a double statement in text. You know, my job is, or my duty is to tolerate you, your duty is to, etc. So these different styles of thinking and different influences, including a lot of racist background, take time to understand. And we thought, let's bring the paintings and the original works to Europe, to Germany, to be fair, and other people in France and in Switzerland have done their work. But in Germany, we wanted people to make their own judgment. And we found, as mentioned previously, that, let me say, the non-professionals, the ones who did not have a career at risk, they were very open. And especially artists were very open, very interested. They looked, they asked, they went away and they thought. But every time that we, especially Elisabeth, who was doing all the work, tried to interest art museums in Germany in an exhibition, it was always a very high hurdle to get the art directors to even look at what they were rejecting. And then there are many examples of excuses why it's too hard, people will not understand it, it's not really fitting our community, it's not really art because it's done by primitive people in the desert. It is really art, but actually it's done for commercial purposes, and therefore it's not true art, it's not high art, it's commercial. So sorry, no, can't show that. And then finally, yes, it's art, of course it's art, but it's not European. People here won't understand it. Please put it into an ethnological museum. Then you'll have a chance to give the whole story. So there are many, many reasons why it's difficult, but I'm very, very happy that here in Fondation Opale, despite all of those decades of objections, you push forward. So keep going.
Thank you. Well, what you were saying, it brings me back to Bernhard, because to put it in the words of Richard Bell, you didn't want Aboriginal art to be a white thing. You wanted to very much to include Aboriginal people in the exhibitions as curators, as people who gave advice. And I think that in the late 80s, early 90s, you were definitely one of the very first people in the European art world, Eurocentric art world, to specifically ask the involvement of the people who made the art. So could you tell us something about that? How was your experience with that?
Well, while I was in Düsseldorf, a long-time friend of mine who was also from Bern, he was professor at the Düsseldorf Art Academy, and one day he called me and said, would you be interested in doing a lecture on Aboriginal art at the Art Academy? And I said, well, I don't think so, that's a good idea, because there are Aboriginal people who can speak about themselves, you know. So far there was interpretation what they were doing, but they hardly could express their ideas and why they are doing artworks. And yeah, so I said, well, we could do so, but I rather suggest to invite an Aboriginal person to do a lecture in Düsseldorf at the art school. And through my correspondence, I came in touch with somebody whose name was Gary Foley, or is Gary Foley, is still around, but he's now also an old man, very sick. And he expressed his interest that, yes, he said, yes, I'm the director of the Aboriginal Arts Board, and so far the Aboriginal Arts Board was run by white administrators, and then as they announced him as the director, he said, the first thing I will do, I will change the whole system. He said, when I went for the first time to the Aboriginal Arts Board in Sydney, there were about 13 employees. 12 of them were white and 1 token black. And while I will be the director, I will reverse that. So there will be a token white and 12
Which was you at some stage, I believe.
Sorry?
Which was you. You were at the Aboriginal Arts Board, I believe.
No, I was not at the Aboriginal Arts Board at this time. He said, while he was in Düsseldorf, we had many discussions, and he said, if you are interested, if you want to do something at the European end, we can invite you to Sydney, and to participate actually in the Aboriginal art sport, which was interesting since just before he said, he made the statement, we will get rid of the white people, and that more or less in the next step he says, we would like to invite you to work at the board. And which then I did. I had the chance to get a desk at the Power Gallery at the Sydney University with Leon Parisian, who was previously the director of the Visual Arts Board at the Australia Council, and there was also Bernice Murphy, who was very much in favor of presenting Aboriginal art. And so they actually provided the desk where I could work next to the Aboriginal Arts Board, so I had two ends where I could rely on sympathetic white art historians who were sympathetic towards the Aboriginal case, and on the other hand, I had Aboriginal people who were ready also to work with white art historians, but only under certain circumstances. The topic was always, we want to have the word, we want to have the say. We are not just followers, we have our own ideas, and we want to express these ideas. And if we get the chance to be accepted as communicators at the European end, and we can speak for ourselves, then yes, we would agree to work together.
Well, Ulrich and Jean-Hubert, I would ask this question to you both, but you from the other side of the world, even if I know that you both traveled a lot, that you both went to Australia, but being here in Europe, how was it for you working with Aboriginal people, artists, curators coming here on respectively Ahajara, because you had people like John Mundine that came, Lynn Onus, in your case, Jean-Hubert, there were people from Yundamu who made the ground paintings. So I'll let you answer both to this question.
Okay, but then I have to come to what happened just after my trip to the Biennale of Sydney, and I can't remember actually how I heard about this guy, Bernhard Lüthi, an artist in Zurich, who was interested in Aboriginal art. And then I met Bernhard in Zurich, and we had very similar ideas. It went very well right away. And that helped me to conceive the Magicien de la Terre. And right away, when I then had the chance to build a staff, a little team with whom I was working, sorry, he became, of course, the sort of obvious correspondent and ambassador who would take care of the Aboriginal participation in the exhibition. And then I must say, at that time, I wasn't personally involved with relation with the Aborigines. This came later afterward.
Ulrich, you were, I think, more closely involved with the Aboriginal curators that were invited.
Yeah. This was a great experience. Bernhard was the key, absolutely. He was the door opener to new visions and new ideas and new responsibilities also for contemporary art museums. So in a way, I felt supported by what old Mr. Schwalbach had always loved with Africa and so on, because he was not a racist or whatsoever, but a great admirer of these things. Well, then came Bernhard, and what we decided was to go to Australia and to create together the conditions for this exhibition. I had to learn about the complicated communication with the artists of all sexes, because for every single reproduction, we had to have a personal agreement of the artist, the creator of that work. And those people who stayed in Sydney and who remained in Sydney were easy to approach, but many of them went back to where they came from originally or changed places, and so it was not always easy. And so this was one of the longest processes of preparation of an exhibition, like 2 or 3 years, if I remember right. But we then, in the end, had the support of so many people through Bernhard's connections in Australia, because he had been living there and had a very special personal profile already. But as I said before, the fact was we found support by all the Aboriginal artists, except those who wanted not to be presented in a only Aboriginal exhibition. There were some who were kind of mostly local or people from the cities, and so who were more related also to the international art world, also who felt it might be also kind of complicated identification to be only named Aboriginal.
Like Gordon Bennett, for instance.
Yeah, voilà. But of course that was something to accept, because they were great artists and they had their own ideas, and then we had to find other ways to name them or to include them or not to include them, but also kind of have them with us. And that was a very, very interesting process. We were lucky at that time to find support, because at that time, for example, Lufthansa flew to Australia, and there was a department at the Lufthansa for supporting cultural events or so. So we kind of traveled several times to Australia, business class, can you imagine? It was quite nice, because normally people of my profession sit just in front of the toilet. They're the cheapest places. It was wonderful. Then in Sydney we found support by the local Lufthansa people, for example, who helped also to do things. We found support by Goethe Institute and other institutions, and the Aboriginal institutions, and then in the end the official institutions, state institutions also, had to move also. The museums and the curators, Bernhard named some of them, helped already a lot in the forefield, but it was a big adventure. It was like traveling and going north, and we have just looked at photos where we were in the Swan together with John Mundine, looking for crocodiles or whatever we did, or whatever, looking for artwork. It was fun also to do that, because we had the support of our local people, of the local museum, of my boss, or the bosses the new boss, Armin Zweiter, who was kind of letting me do, and so, the decisions
Many things came together for Jara. If I listen to the relative obstacles of Magiciens de la Terre, then Jara, it seems to be very different. The support of the director, the Lufthansa that was sponsoring, so many things.
Yeah, but we had, for example, all the professional people had seen the exhibition in Paris, and the professional reaction to this thing here. Yeah. This was for me, the most impressive situation in the whole exhibition, because it stayed in my mind, for many, many, many years. And I found this open cooperation of a fantastic European sculptor with fantastic sculptors and image givers from Australia. This was contemporary art. This was ours. Our main idea was to name these things, like all the things that we were also doing with African art or whatever. It is contemporary art. It is not something from somewhere else, but they are there now. Even if they're different, if their tradition is different, they are contemporary, and this is why we have to do something with them.
So in many ways, Magiciens de la Terre paved the way for Jara.
Yeah, but you have to know that this picture was the most criticized of the exhibition in Paris, because some stupid critics said, "Yeah, but this is then they took suddenly the position of, you know, the decolonization and so on, and say, but the English artist is vertical and above, looking above the oppressed little aboriginals.
Yeah, but it is the sun that is coming up with it. No, but at that time there were still colonial museums in Paris. You know, the Musée Colonial.
No, it didn't exist anymore. No,
but it had all this entrance situation and this.
Well, I was director of this museum afterwards. But in the meantime, it has been changed by Malraux into a Musée des Arts d'Afrique et d'Océanie, and it's the first museum that says that it was dealing with the arts of these two continents, and not like all other countries in Europe.
Wonderful.
Which were dealing sometimes with African and oceanic art, but then always in ethnological and anthropological museum. So it's the only museum that were dealing really with the art.
But they still had the wall paintings in the entrance situation.
Oh yes, of course.
Voila.
But they're marvelous.
You can say that today, yeah, absolutely. No, I think we have similar ideas, but of course very different experiences. And I can only say it is really true, Magicien de la Terre, because it was courageous. It was setting something in a post-colonial situation that we in Germany had not really accepted as our thing. You know, our colonies were long gone, and the crimes we had committed there were overshadowed by other bigger crimes that had been committed by German politics and German armies and so on and so on. We only started slowly to do things. What we tried to do is to pick up that openness from the idea of your exhibition there. This was really at least my move, and I was so moved when Bernhard came and brought us deeper into this whole thing and was ready to work with us, you know, which was probably for free artists from Switzerland not so easy to join into German museums and the conditions and talking to administrators and about money problems and whatsoever. Yeah, but we did it, we managed anyway to get things together. Yeah.
Lindsay, from your side?
I just wanted to disagree about the progress. So I think the situation currently in Europe and in Germany is that every 5 years or so, someone is brave in an art museum and holds an art exhibition, including Indigenous art. And there is a trend, which is a good trend, to bring Indigenous artworks into, let me say, group exhibition with different European artists. And of course, if you go to the Venice Biennale, there you'll see a constellation, a galaxy of different art styles from many different nations. So it's beginning to get into the global consciousness that there is this aesthetic which many different nations pursue, all different, and unfortunately still in Europe, it still takes an adventurous curator to establish or to take the risk in their career. Or what, you want to put on this stuff from down under? You know, why not Picasso again? You know, we've had 200 exhibitions of his in the last 10 years, but don't worry, it will be a big success. So I think this risk-taking is one of the most difficult things to make happen in the art museum scene.
Ulrich, it brings me back to you, because after Düsseldorf, you went to Hanover, became director of the Sprengel Museum, where you did do not less than 6 or 7 important exhibitions of Aboriginal art, and you told me that after your retirement, you saw that wasn't really taken up.
Yeah, my follower, I left the museum due to age 10 years ago. My follower started his career also in making differences. You know, you have to declare, you know, he didn't cancel things really, but he made clear that he was more into Beckmann and Picasso. And he just finished an exhibition called Beckmann and Picasso after 10 years. It takes a lot of time. And that was only done because 2 German museums, Wuppertal and Hanover, who have large collections of both artists, put together their stuff and they did the things. Yeah, people who come from different backgrounds, I think it is not so much a question of courageousness or whatsoever, because all these younger colleagues do other things today. We have had much more discussions about the role of women also and the overseen role of women in European art history, contemporary art, Me Too discussions and all that. You know what I mean. I mean, this has been in many places in the Western world has been very strongly discussed, and also people from different racial backgrounds have declared their importance and political will and all this. So there is sometimes the surprising fact that old colleagues who haven't done anything for Aboriginal art in their lifetime make an exhibition like in Cologne. We went together as a discussion, then in Cologne with Caspar Koenig, who hadn't done anything for Aboriginal art in his lifetime.
For years.
Yeah, well, okay. No, I think it is also an openness in philosophy, in knowledge, or wanting to learn more about the world. And if you have the chance to meet people who can teach you, help you, carry you a little bit of the way, then you can start in a different way. And also you guys with your gallery, you have done a wonderful big book, a scientific book in a way, about what is that, the content, the philosophical and the pictorial content of Aboriginal art, and so on and so on. I mean, all these things together, it's not so easy to follow everything at the same time. And in Germany now we have a situation, if I may, sorry to talk so long, but we have a situation where people in museums lose their jobs or get problems because they invite people of critical approach, Jewish artists of critical approach to a Gaza war or whatever. We have had that fact that a museum director had to cancel an exhibition with a Jewish artist who is a professor in Braunschweig in her place, because this professor had been critical towards the Israeli actions in Gaza or whatsoever. And then she lost her job. And what I see in many fields now, that fear, obedience, shutting up and obeying or whatever, that is something that is spreading, because in Germany now we have a situation that reminds me of the old days of the Berufsverbote, if you know what that is, when you were not allowed to be a leftist and at the same time carrying post or whatever, and now you're not allowed to have a critical approach towards certain aspects of Israeli war politics or whatsoever, and then if you do that you're announced to be anti-Semitic, which is a big discussion, and so on, so on, so on. Okay, I just want to mention, it's not so easy. It's not so easy. Intellectuals, art historians, heaps of us are idiots, as there are idiots in all other professions. Many people want to keep their jobs, some people have families and they fear, no, it's very normal things. Yet, courageousness is I feel courageousness is not necessary, it's just interest and not willing to stay with the old ideas and not willing to get old and get kind of stinky.
But still, Jara brought to return to Indigenous Australian art specifically, still, what's the impetus for you to do several exhibitions at Sprengel Museum? But let me ask another question, which is also directed to all of you, and it's perhaps a question that's we are moving towards the end. The photograph that you see here, as Jean-Hubert mentioned, it's Magicien de la Terre. It's, even if it was perhaps the most criticized image, at the same time it was one of the most publicized images as well. It's an it has become an iconic exhibition of a legendary, an iconic image of a legendary exhibition. And if you visit the exhibition, and I assume that most of you have already visited the exhibition, you will see that's in this exhibition. There is a work by Richard Long, which is on the floor, stone circle, and work by You and the Moo artists, which is on the wall. So there is a reversal of the both artworks. But this brings me to what has changed since 1989 and 2024. And it's a question that's asked to all of you. And perhaps let's start with Bernhard.
What has changed? Well, I think exhibitions as we just did here in Lens, it's not a normal, usual thing, but slowly ideas like this are getting accepted, and it's high time. It is like this, and I really would ask Fondation Opale to stick to this commitment and to following up. We are not at the very end, and we are not where we actually should be, but we are on a good way. And Fondation Opale is a very important institution where things are changing and where people working there are ready to find new ways how this art can be presented.
And it's perhaps important to mention that two of the artworks in the exhibition by Brooke Andrew and Archie Moore deserves a little bit more elaboration, because Brooke Andrew was the first Indigenous Australian to create a biennale,
yes.
Sydney Biennale, in which part of your archive was shown at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and then of course Archie Moore, who won the Lion d'Or, the Golden Lion, at Venice Biennale, which
something we consider. In my lifetime, I thought this will never happen, you know. So, but it did.
Yes. So there might be difference.
Yes.
I think things are evolving, that's for sure, but it's evolving quite slowly, I would say. Like Bernhard said, well, the ideas have done their way, and they're evolving, and there is a new generation that is much more open than the previous one. Nevertheless, for the art, really, the problem is that what I call the majors, you know, comparing with the Hollywood and so on, that is the big museums in the metropole, they're still extremely conservative. And they're very slowly, well, now trying to, from time to time, to make an exhibition, a solo exhibition of an African artist or an artist coming from Asia. But it's very slow, and the major are definitely very conservative, and they have also, well, very contradictory policies, because, well, you can see that most of the museum, they spent their acquisition budget, which is reducing for all the museums nowadays, of course, for the usual European American art. And then they build up some committees that have to deal with South America, with Africa, and so on. And these committees, well, their task is actually to find people in these countries that are ready to donate works to the museum. But they don't spend the acquisition budget for these countries, for this, well, what is not the core of of what we call the contemporary art, even if it's changing slowly, and we have more and more people coming from indigenous cultures and so on, but it's quite slow.
Yeah. Lindsay, yeah.
I'd really like to take up that point about donations. So Elizabeth and I have been trying the last years to find an art museum in Germany which we could trust to accept our collection as a donation. and not to put it in their cellar or to give away or to sell on the market later, but to really keep it, show it, and be a centre like here in the Fondation Opale for German people to see originals and not just read about it or see it on the internet. So far, we have not been so lucky to have the right discussions, but okay, we keep going, and we hope that this will happen. But it's another, what can you say? It's another step, as you said, to accept a donation and then to promise to use it. That's the thing.
Indeed, to show it.
Yes.
Ulrich?
Yeah. Well, if you're 10 years out of the business and just going as an elderly visitor to museums, you don't know all the secrets. But what I feel is a lot of things have changed. In Germany, for example, we have more and more curators of women and men from, let's say, Turkish background, fourth generation or whatsoever, which is wonderful because we were missing that. People who are coming from families of immigrants, because we have so many people who have fled their home countries because they were kind of going to be killed for religious reasons or for ethnic reasons or so. And you find that more and more in professional business, and you find it also in exhibitions. We have a lot of names that you usually couldn't simply pronounce because there is a different thing behind it, you know, Asian and whatever, North African, and I feel quite moved by that. There is a lot of things going on, probably not sufficient, and of course it is still difficult for Aboriginal themes because it is pretty far away, this Australia, and what we hear about movements, political movements in Australia, so the big discussion that is now going on in Australia, why was this public demand, why ended it so negatively to enable Aboriginal people to be more a part of official politics in Australia? And so it is not very encouraging, you know, for people who want to help these things. But we have contacts, colleagues, international organizations like ECOM, CIMAM, and so on are very, very important to exchange ideas and to find cooperations and to fight for money commonly. And yeah, I think as still we have to care for corrections of German injustices, of occupation of Jewish collections during fascism, and so I'm sitting in one of these organizations where we talk about enabling people to do research with state money for that and so on. This is also still going on. There's a lot of things, but there is a lot of awareness, even if there is this slight move towards the right, also in Germany. You can feel it also in public discussions and so on. And we look at France now and wonder, how is this going to end up? We look at Italy. Last year, to say that quickly, I wrote an email to the Italian ambassador in Germany and told him that I'm not going to see the Biennale, the Architecture Biennale in Venice, because of the horrible politics of the neo-fascist government in Italy towards refugees in the Mediterranean. And of course he never answered, but I think he read it. But, so there is a lot of things. I think it's a mixed situation. Things go better in a certain way, also because we have had guys like him who give away also their collections and things, yeah, and encourage wonderful supporters like you guys here and in Lens, and so. But we have to go on. Nothing is guaranteed. Nothing.
The conclusion is that since 1989, also perhaps of demographic changes in the world, things have physically changed, but underlying there might still be some issues, and someone like Bernhard, who is still on the barricades, and I think in a certain way you're all still on the barricades, that things might move towards, let's hope, a better world. And that's what art about, and arts can play a very important role in that, moving towards a better world, without being too naive, I hope. So, Lindsay, yes?
Just one word, as Ulrich said, Elizabeth Bear and myself tried to put together in a fat book in German material for the German art historians to get better contact and better information on the arts. And we translated it now into English, a little bit more global, and it's available open access. So if anyone's interested, you can pick it up off the web afterwards. And I invite any questions, but I think 500 pages will take you a bit of time to work through.
Come back at the end. Thank you. That's it. Well, and I'm left to thank you all for your very valuable contribution. This for the Fondation, this exhibition is very much, how would I say, a shift exhibition in that sense. It brings together the past, the work that you have been doing, Magicien de la Terre, Rark. It is an homage to this exhibition. It is an homage not only to Bernhard, but to you all. And from this point onwards, I think we can move forwards and continue, well, the battle, the struggle, but also showing the beauty that this world has to offer in the end. It's perhaps important to mention that another reason to stage this exhibition is because Bernhard Lüthi's archive will be housed in the Fondation Opale and will form the core of a research center, of an archive that is focused on the presence of indigenous Australian art and culture in Europe. So, gentlemen, thank you. Well, no woman, unfortunately, but gentlemen, thank you very much. And Elisabeth, thank you very much. If there are questions, I invite people perhaps that will have the questions in the cafe later on.
First off, I would like to thank you to the panel. It's more of a comment than a question. I guess, you know, first and foremost, I've been studying these exhibitions for a long time. What is happening now is the comments or the commentary between First Nations art and contemporary art from all over the world is something that takes place constantly now. You did it such a long time ago. It was really unfortunate that you got so, you know, the critiques around that time was so negative. Right now it is 2 exhibitions that are celebrated for First Nations people. Sorry, I'm a little bit emotional. I just want to thank you for doing it. I work closely with Hetty Perkins, Brenda Croft. Us First Nations curators have followed in the footsteps of people like John Mundine and the 2 others that I've mentioned. Fondation Opale is a leading institution that all First Nations curators in Australia talk about. The dialogue that you have here, the dialogue that's happened today is extraordinary. I wish we could have this more in Australia. I also wish our directors, who are generally white males that work in our institutions, would celebrate our First Nations art much more than they do. We are fighting for First Nations exhibitions to be the key exhibitions in the summer over, you know, Melbourne or international exhibitions. And you mentioned that before, you know, why should we celebrate First Nations art in our own country? Because we are First Nations people. It's so political, it's so important. But what you did here, looking at the screen, is so extraordinary. Looking at these 2 works juxtaposed to each other, talking to each other, celebrating each other. And I guess it's just thank you so much for doing it such a long time ago, because we are still fighting as First Nations curators, artists, for our own voice in our own country. So thank you.
What has become of Bernhard Lüthi's idea to have a solo exhibition of Don Maranjo as the RARC exhibition? It was the first solo exhibition of an Aboriginal artist in Europe. Has it had its followers? Did it disappear? What has become of the idea?
Well, while I was concentrating on Aradara, which is a group exhibition, I always had in my mind to organize once an exhibition of an Australian Aboriginal individual artist. And the person I did approach, unfortunately is not here, Guido Manegwanio. He was also interested while he was curator at the Kunsthaus in Zurich to show Aradara at the Kunsthaus. But his colleagues were against this idea and we had to cancel it. So when I was looking around in Switzerland for a venue where I could show John Mavanjul, I also did approach him. And surprisingly, his first reaction was when I asked him, do you have any idea where I could show John Mavanjul in Switzerland as an individual artist? He said, why don't you ask me? At this time he was the director of the Musée d'Engel in Basel, and I said, well, I doubt if this would be possible for you to do this exhibition in Basel, because there would be a lot of resistance. And he said, well, let's try. Lucky enough, there was somebody else in Basel, the curator for Australian and South Pacific artworks at the Museum der Kulturen, and he said, well, we have quite a large collection of bark paintings, and why are we not trying to combine something? That means we are showing the early barks from this region where John Mavanjul comes from, and we can do a combination, which we tried, which was not very easy to do, but finally we cut through, and the exhibition was quite successful. It also went to Ulrich Krempel in Hanover.
And interesting to mention is that Australia had its John Mavanjul exhibition more than 10 years later at the Museum of Contemporary Art.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was, I just wanted to tell that because through our early visits to Australia, I was happy to own for many years a painting by John Mavanjul that I bought up in the north, and not a big one, but a very beautiful one. And then the Australian colleagues, when I was already retired, came and asked if they might lend it for their exhibition there, and I said to them, yeah, under the condition that I put it into a kind of special suitcase and carry it and bring it myself, and not have it in a box that is somewhere in the rain standing on the airport and waiting for further transport or whatsoever. Then I went again to pick it up after it was shown in Sydney, and the second venue was where?
It was the Art Gallery of South Australia.
Yeah, South Australia. And it was just fantastic to understand that this was one of the very few, or the only painting about a very special place that Mavanjul had painted, and so understood only many, many years later the importance of that painting, and also learned that through the granddaughter of the artist who had been standing next to it, and so on and so on. So, but Mavanjul was, of course, a very convincing figure. He was getting 70 or 75 or 65 or something.
He's still alive, eh?
Yeah, okay, let's hope he goes longer, you know. But it was also because one has to understand that new generations, also in Australian museums, perhaps understand something about local treasures, like Emmeline Quarry, also,
yes.
You know, second person, a wonderful woman painter that is of international reputation today, and you know, the same with Mavanjul and others, I would say. And that is also a result of all these processes that we have been talking about.
Yeah, and you were mentioning Emmeline Quarry, and in July 2025, Emmeline Quarry will have a a retrospective exhibition at the Tate Modern.
Voila. So much it deserves.
So which Kelly is contributing.
May I just ask how it started with Mowanjul? Because, well, when I went to Australia the first time to inquire about the different painters, I was lost. There were so many painters, you know, and a few galleries, and I asked many people, you know, whom they thought were better than another. Also, we had a lot of talks with Bernhard, and Bernhard was always much more on politics, and I was much more on aesthetics. You know, so he didn't care so much about choosing the best one in terms of aesthetics and forms and shapes and so on. And so I was left, and one curator said to me, the guy who was in charge of this department at the New South Wales Art Gallery, he said, but just go to the gallery and choose the ones you like, you know. He was right. And then I went there and I spent, well, really hours there looking at all the paintings that were there. And I found out that there was this Mowanjul that was doing this, what is called the leurs, actually this little, how do you say?
Cross-hatching.
Cross-hatching, yeah, these little things. And it was so refined and so delicate and so extremely well done that I thought this guy must be really the best one. And this is why Mowanjul came into Magicien de la Terre, together with Wun Wun also, and of course the Yuan Dumu group.
Yeah, right, which was a very important exhibition, and I should also mention that in the public we have Christian Kaufmann, who was also working on that exhibition. Thank you. Well, thank you again. I think you will still be around in the exhibition, so if there are more questions or any of you want to say something personally, it's possible. Thank you, and thank you all for coming.